When discussing Revan's time as a Sith Lord, a lot of the focus and attention is given to how he returned from being a war hero to a scourge of the Republic. His battlefield exploits, as well as his connection to the dark side, have rarely been replicated. Not only this, but he was an expert strategist, one who knew how to break down the Republic and the Jedi from both the outside and the inside. Supplementing all of this was his exceptional charisma, which saw him recruit many members of the Jedi Order and the Republic military to his side. But the aspect that's not often talked about is the Sith Empire under Revan's rule. For the brief period when Revan was a Dark Lord of the Sith, he followed in the footsteps of the Sith Lords who came before, establishing a vast and a powerful galactic rule. But what was his empire actually like? How was it different from the others that came before and after? And is it possible that Revan's empire was the best version of what a Sith Empire could be? Greetings again, lore junkies, and welcome back to the archives. In today's holocron, we're going to be talking about how strong Darth Revan's empire actually was. If you like these deep dives into the lesser observed parts of the lore, then let us know what you want to see next in the comments down below. Now, let's enter the archives and begin. The first thing to note when talking about Revan's empire was its size. What many people do not know is the area of space he possessed was absolutely gargantuan. According to the maps provided by Star Wars Essential Atlas, his Sith Empire at its peak occupied nearly half of the known galaxy, absolutely dwarfing Hutt space, as well as squeezing the Republic against the unknown regions. Darth Revan didn't just simply occupy a few planets as fortress worlds, he established actual territory. It would all begin with the reclamation of Sith space in the Stygian caldera over in the northeastern quadrant of the galaxy. Darth Revan and Darth Malak had journeyed into wild space after finding evidence that the old Sith Empire still existed. There they found Drome and Kos, and had their minds dominated by Emperor Vitiate. Vitiate sent them back to find the Starforge and launch a major offense against the Republic in order to test its resolve. However, Vitiate underestimated the power of the two Jedi, who managed to break free of his hold over their minds. Unfortunately, they were still swayed permanently to the dark side. Although they had no memories of Vitiate, they still believed it was their idea and their mission to find the Starforge and bring the Republic to its knees. This took them on a journey throughout several worlds to find star maps left behind by the ancient race of the Rakata, and that's when they went to Korriban, the ancestral homeworld of the Sith. It was there that Darth Revan discovered that a Sith Academy was still functioning on the planet. It had been established by the Dark Lord Exar Kun some 40 years earlier. But after Exar's defeat, the Jedi didn't bother to go and shut down the Academy, believing that without their leader, they were of no consequence and would simply kill each other off. But the Jedi were wrong. The Academy had remained intact under the leadership of a strong headmaster, one who was awaiting the return of a true Dark Lord. That return came in the form of Darth Revan, and the Academy promptly pledged their allegiance to the new Lords of the Sith. Revan and Malak operated quickly and quietly for the formative months of their empire. They took over all of Sith space, and then finally located the Starforge over the Rakatan homeworld of Rakata Prime, also known as Lehon. The Starforge was a sentient space station factory that harnessed the star energy of its nearby star and the dark side of the Force to create an endless supply of ships, droids, and weapons of war based on the designs that fed it. Darth Revan would feed its designs to the Republic's catalog of Indicator-class cruisers and Centurion-class battlecruisers. Those were the ships that he was most familiar with. After all, he had been in command of a sizable navy during the preceding Mandalorian War. Also, as a way to pay homage to the ancient Sith, and to publicly announce himself as a Dark Lord, Revan had the Starforge craft Darafam-class battleships. These were incredibly important to history, as they were the ships under the command of Naga Sadow when the old Sith Empire invaded the Republic during the Great Hyperspace War. Along with his navy, he had the Starforge craft a large storm of snub fighters and troop shuttles. Revan would even make the silhouette of the Starforge the emblem of his empire, proving how crucial it was to his victory. With Revan's oppressively massive navy, he made a grand appearance to the Republic, and through his charisma caused many of his old comrades to defect to his empire. Many of the men who served under him during the Mandalorian Wars had seen the Republic's deficiencies and desired to follow Revan's new vision. This would include a surprising number of Jedi as well, all of whom were shipped off to the Korriban Academy to become Dark Jedi or Sith. Revan proceeded to have his assassins and agents infiltrate the Republic on all levels, sabotaging war efforts and swaying even more people to his side in his grand empire. Revan would capture some of his old Jedi friends, torture them, forcing them to embrace the dark side. As his influence grew into the unknown regions, Revan began his assault on the Republic. But unlike the Sith Lords of the past, Revan had a very different approach to this war. For the first time in galactic history, his Sith Empire was going to actually capture and hold territory. Many of those who waged war against the Republic in the past would capture planets only as a way to push the front lines. Their ultimate goal was to create a supply chain that would allow them to capture Coruscant directly, to bring down the capital. But Revan's approach was different. His captured territories weren't just prisoners of war, they would be absorbed into his ever-growing empire. So his war was not just one of wanton destruction, but of true conquest. Darth Revan didn't actually want to destroy the Republic, he wanted to remake it. He saw the Jedi and the institution they served as weak and failing. Because of Exar Kun's attack 40 years earlier, the Jedi were in a sorry state, and the Republic was weary. Revan had seen how they had almost crumbled under the onslaught of the Mandalorians, and how slow and ineffectual the Jedi were to respond to the crisis. And so Revan sought not to bring down his home, but to improve it, to make it stronger. Because although he could not remember Vitiate, he still suspected there was another threat on the horizon, one that the Republic needed to be ready for. In Revan's mind, only the strength of the Sith and the dark side could bring the Republic to its greatest heights and greatest glory. But as for the territories that he did own, he would establish an interesting structure of life. Much like Sidious's empire in the future, Revan would promote the idea of competition in all levels of his command structure. The guiding principle of this empire was survival of the fittest, as was the way of the dark side. Darth Revan made no apologies for inserting Sith doctrine even into the lives of non-Force sensitive beings. He was fully devoted to their ways, and he wanted to go all in. He had seen during the Mandalorian Wars how only struggle will breed success, and how one had to be brought to a place where they were willing to do anything to survive and to win. And once they achieved that, evolution could take place. This was the essence of the Code of the Sith. Even the lowliest grunts were encouraged to compete for positions of power through any means necessary. While this method of promotion created a tense and a divisive system of governance, it nevertheless ensured a powerful and a capable military. And while this was something that made Sidious's empire very weak, Revan, as the supreme ruler, stepped up and made his presence a lot more known. It was Revan's charisma that kept all of his minions in line, and his frequent shows of power and competency that maintained their fear and their respect for him. Emperor Palpatine became a recluse, having all of his orders carried out through Vader and his Moffs, all of whom had ambitions of their own. But it was the mask, the face of Darth Revan who established himself as an indomitable personality who would tolerate no failure. He inspired those in the Empire to believe themselves to be invincible, and because of this he blazed a trail of fire through the Republic. When it came to the conquered territories and planets within his empire, Revan had a unique approach to managing them in wartime. A single governor, often a dark Jedi, would be posted on each world and housed within an embassy. They were given command over a security force large enough to keep the planet under their control. The Sith fleet itself was often on the move, because Revan liked to strike hard and to move quickly. Not to mention, Revan preferred being right on the front lines, commanding his troopers. During the war, the purpose of these embassies wasn't so much to provide a governing body of conquered worlds. In actuality, they were more like command points, meant to expedite the support and deployment of troops and military forces. Everyday life under Revan's empire was actually a lot more tame than occupation from other Sith empires in history. More often than not, when Revan established Sith presence on a planet, they were put under careful watch and maximum security. Laws were enforced with severity, and all of the world's leaders were answerable to the Sith. However, the worlds were largely allowed to retain their leaders and their established way of life, so long as they were obedient to the Dark Lord. If a leader proved to be an issue, they were removed from that position and a puppet figure was established by the Empire. Usually the best of the Sith troopers were kept on the front lines, and the security forces on the occupied planets were there to ensure that the citizens did not cause problems, especially those that would take Imperial resources off of the war front. So Revan's empire was incredibly strict on cracking down on insurgency and political unrest. Unfortunately, although we looked, we don't have a lot of information about the day-to-day life of an Imperial citizen under Revan. mostly because his empire lasted a grand total of 4 years. In Knights of the Old Republic, the closest thing we get to what Imperial life was like is when we explore Terrace. However, that planet already had its own social issues, and it was put under quarantine by Darth Malak, who was hunting Bastila Shan. So the severity of the Sith's occupation of Terrace during that time isn't exactly an accurate representation of what it would have been like under Revan on other worlds. Despite how tough of a leader Revan was though, he was a lot more fair than other Lords of the Sith had been. And I think it would have been interesting to see what kind of a society he would have eventually imposed if he had gotten control of the Republic, or if his empire had lasted long enough for him to make widespread changes. But as it so happens, the worlds under his banner were more like conquered territories with Sith presence established and as their governing leaders, rather than a lot of the cruelty that we see in the ancient empire as well as Sidious's empire. Most citizens' lives didn't really seem to change much, so long as they kept their heads down and didn't cause issues for Revan. As we mentioned, his empire was absolutely massive. In just a few years, Revan had conquered a portion of the known galaxy comparable to the size of the Republic itself. In that day of 3,959 BBY, the Republic had explored only so much of the galaxy, with most of their expansion being in the eastern side. A lot of the Outer Rim territory to the north and south remained unknown. Revan held most of the northeastern and the eastern sides of the galaxy with his territory, with it even extending down over into Hutt space and nearly consuming it. Based on the star maps, Revan is actually the third largest Sith Empire in galactic history, beaten only by Vitiate, who controlled half of the larger known galaxy by the start of the Cold War, and of course beaten by Palpatine, who owned the entire known galaxy. There were also 3 isolated blotches of space dangerously close to the core that were under Revan's control as well. He owned a strip of hyperspace from the Yag Dol to Fondor, directly beneath the core in the Inner Rim. East of that in the colonies, he had another strip of hyperspace which included Gamor, Alatine, and Chardan. And then directly within the core itself, Revan had Duro, Corellia, and Rendili. All 3 of those had been founding planets of the Republic itself. This poised him to launch a deadly attack directly at Coruscant. Had it not been for Malak's betrayal and the Jedi wiping his memory, Revan would have soundly defeated the Republic within a matter of weeks after this point. Revan had one of the most successful runs as a supreme leader in galactic history. In fact, in many ways, we would consider him to be more successful than even Vitiate's empire based on some of these following factors. Both of them controlled half of the known galaxy. However, it took 20 years of excruciating war for Vitiate to accomplish this, while Revan only needed 3 years. By the end of the Great Galactic War, the reconstituted Sith Empire did manage to defeat the Republic, but they called for a ceasefire and lived alongside them in the galaxy. Revan, however, was poised to bring down the Republic entirely, transforming it into his own vision. Revan was preparing to build a new civilization. From the warforges of the Starforge came endless fleets. Revan scientists and engineers blended Rakatan and Republic technologies to create ships that could manufacture their own ammunition, repair themselves in combat, and replenish their ranks without supply lines. His empire's military infrastructure was unparalleled, a synthesis of the Republic's discipline, Mandalorian tenacity, and Sith ruthlessness. Entire worlds like Korriban, Lehon, and even Terrace were transformed into industrial and military hubs, feeding an ever-expanding war machine that threatened to envelop the galaxy. And yet, at the heart of that machine stood Revan, the Dark Lord who saw every victory not as conquest, but as refinement. Revan imposed a strict doctrine where failure was death and success was transcendence, believing the Empire's evolution depended on constant struggles. His soldiers and Empire worshipped him not as a tyrant, but as a living ideal, the ultimate union of Jedi and Sith. Under Darth Revan, the Sith Code was not whispered in secrecy, it was law. The galaxy trembled not because his fleets or because of his armies, but because of his vision and what it promised. Had Revan not been betrayed by Malak, the Republic's fall would not have been an end. It would have been the dawn of a new Sith Golden Age, an empire forged by Revan's will, destined to last 1,000 generations. But we of course want to know what you think. Had you wondered what Revan's empire was actually like, and would you have wanted to see it live longer? Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel. Your input is what brings this all together, and we have so much fun fighting new lore for you guys to enjoy. Until next time, thank you for joining me in the archives, and may the Force be with you.